Early Greek philosophers, pre-Socratic philosophers, the Sophists. History and Systems, Professor Michael Botwin, Department of Psychology, California State University, Fresno. The Sophists were professional teachers who believed that the communication of an idea was the essence of knowledge. Not whether the idea was valid or anything more, simply the communication of the idea. Now we have to put the Sophists in context before we continue discussing them. The Sophists were itinerant teachers. They moved from place to place, teaching the children, usually male, of rich Greek people. The basic person in Greece did not get an education of any kind, only the wealthy. There weren't schools as we knew it, or know it now, but individuals were simply taught one-on-one by teachers hired by the master of the household to teach their kids. So the notion of the sophist becomes really important because they have a philosophy that fits in with the nature of their employment. Now the sophists go on and say, having trouble getting my slide to advance, there we go, that an individual's experiences are real to them, and many different forms of reality exist. Kind of mind-blowing, but basically what they're saying is everyone experiences things in life. They're real to them, and many forms of reality may exist based on your own experiences. And we'll elaborate that as we build through the idea of the sophist. What can one person's consciousness know about another person's consciousness? Can I really get in your head and understand how you're thinking? If we could do that, that would be great. In social psychology now, there is a area of research known as mind reading, where people are trying to find out how can you get into the heads of other people. Is it possible? And some people are better at it than others. In my lab, we have an instrument to assess something called cross-sex mind reading, which is a specific form of mind reading. And it has to do with the ability to get into potential mates' heads. And this is important in the dating and mating game. Can you get in someone's head, figure out what would be the perfect date or the perfect experience for them? But I think that no matter how good we get at it, there's still going to be some limits there. The first of our sophists that we're going to talk about is Gorgias. And Gorgias says knowing something outside of the mind and then communicating it is impossible. Now, this is going to be one of the big things that happens in philosophy for thousands of years to this day. Can I really know something outside of my head? And can I communicate it? Gorgias says no, for lots of reasons. He says there's a gap between the physical world and the perceiving person. Think about it. Anything that we perceive, and Gorgias kind of got some important things right, is interpreted by the brain. And there are things that we can perceive that are in the physical world, and there are things that we cannot perceive. Watched a fascinating video on how insects like butterflies have sight that extends into the infrared area of light. We can't see this stuff without some kind of processing, but that's just part of their natural world. We didn't have to perceive it for surviving, so we don't. But those waves of light, uh, frequencies of sound that we can't hear, but maybe our dogs can, uh, differentiate between the physical world and us as a perceiving person. Furthermore, there are gaps and individual differences in this. Right now I'm looking at you through the magic of contact lenses. If I weren't wearing my contacts right now, sorry for the double negative. Oh, I didn't say double negative, sorry, just tired. I wouldn't be able to see the screen that I'm trying to read my PowerPoint off of. That's because I'm getting to be an old fart. You may perceive the world very differently and maybe more accurately because you have far younger eyes. I also have some other issues. I'm not going to pull my contacts out, but I also have these things in my ear. Without them, I miss a lot of what's going on in conversations and things. And I miss hearing things. Why? Because when I was a youth, I listened to really, really loud rock and roll music and did lots of other stuff that was not probably really great for my hearing, and now I'm paying for it. But it's increased my gap between the physical world and what I perceive. And even with contacts and hearing aids, it's still not perfect, and no matter how good your senses are, there's still going to be a gap. Georgius says truth is relative. To give you a bad joke, if you know my relatives, then you know what how bad the truth can be. Ba-dum-bum-bum. Drum roll there. Bad joke. Sorry. Old vaudeville comedian stuff. Truth is relative. Your truth may be different than my truth. You may have a different belief system than I do. And Georgius says these are all valid. Because truth is relative to the perceiver. His student, Protagoras, will expand on some of these ideas. So let's look at what he has to say. Protagoras says, of all things man is the measure, of those things that are what they are, of those things that are not what they are not. Can't mark them off for the double negatives there. Now, this is a very important statement in terms of human philosophy, because what Protagoras is basically saying is that anything in terms of its evaluation is done by humans and not by not other species, excuse me. I get excited when I talk about this stuff. So, for example, Pippin the dog you see at the end of every video, lying on the couch next to me watching me work. And when I feed him, he happens to like the little Caesar meals. And I get really upset when I read the little Caesar labels because I think they're a lot of cheesy junk. So there'll be filet flavor and prime rib or chicken and vegetables or this, that, and the other thing. The dog doesn't really care. But who's buying the dog food? Pippin or me? So I'm sure there's lots of people that say, geez, that looks good. That sounds like a good meal. I'd eat that. People who have studied what animals like to eat, find that they prefer the innards. So imagine walking down the aisle of your favorite grocery store and looking for cow intestine and offal. You know, might not sound like anything we want to eat, but the dogs would love it. There's all the stereotypes of cats, and I'm not a cat person, although I have relatives with cats, and I forgive them. Just teasing. The old stereotype is cats like mice, cats like rats. Imagine walking down the grocery store aisle looking for, my mother-in-law's cats get seafood pate. Could you imagine buying mouse pate? No, because it messes your stomach up. We measure things through humanness, not through dogness or catness. Protagoras also says that truth is dependent on the perceiver than reality. Think about this one. One of my colleagues, Matt Sharps, studies criminal behavior and forensics. And when he tells me about his research, a lot of it has to do with identifying weapons, identifying things in crime scenes. It's very interesting to listen to him talk because different people have radically different perceptions of the same scenarios he uses in his research. So we have to remember this as well. He also says that perceptions vary due to our past experiences, and that there is going to be large individual differences in these perceptions. Think about it. Where you were raised, how you were raised, the culture you were raised in, are all going to give you different perceptions on the same phenomena. I'm ethnically Polish, and in Polish culture, which I'm not super cultural, but I like the foods and I know a couple of the swear words. So there is a food that I was raised with. It's a major, major treat. I'd rather have a bowl of this soup than a filet mignon any day. Problem with this food is it's a soup. It looks to someone outside of Polish culture who's never experienced it before absolutely gross. It's a soup made out of duck, and it's thickened with the blood of the duck, which is the part where lots of people start getting grossed out about. And then it's got a bunch of vegetables in it, and it's also got fruit like prunes and raisins and things. It's actually kind of a sweet soup. My mother would make it every Christmas for a very long time. And she recently stopped making it only because it's virtually impossible to get duck blood. You had to go to the old school Polish butcher in a place called Hamtramck, Detroit, which used to be a Polish enclave around Detroit. And all of those places are now gone, so we're out of luck with the soup. My brother-in-law, who was not raised with Chinina, won't even be in the same room with it while we eat. He just sees it as the biggest gross out thing in the world. So his perception of the soup is very different than my perception of it. Most likely than yours. But if you think about the things you grew up with and the experiences that you have, they're going to lead you to experience things in fundamentally different ways. Now, Protagoras also says truth is culture bound. It's an interesting notion. What is true in Western civilization and Western European culture is different than the truths of the cultures of other regions or even across borders. I spent 5 weeks in Stockholm as a visiting professor a while ago, and it was an extremely enlightening experience. The Swedes liked to tout how education was free, healthcare was free, daycare was free, lots and lots and lots of social services provided by the government. But who's the government? The people. And who ultimately pays for all this stuff? The people. So tax rates in Sweden are at or above, depending on where you're at, 60%. Try to get 60% taxes in this country and you'll have a rebellion, because that's not how we've done things. So even though free education, free healthcare, and that sounds good, when your taxes go up to pay for it, for a lot of people, it doesn't sound very good anymore. If you were raised in a certain family with certain ethnic, cultural upbringings, you may believe things differently than other individuals who are raised in other cultures. My personal view is that a lot of our international conflict comes from the relative truths of different countries and what they think is right or wrong, not only ours. So truth, very culture bound. Protagoras got that one right. Protagoras also says to understand a person, you must understand their beliefs. And I think this is fundamentally true too. If you're a paranoid person, you think the world is out to get you, you have to understand why that person's paranoid. If the person's hopelessly optimistic about the world, you have to understand their beliefs before you can understand them. And beliefs can range from anything from, a lot of them are culture bound. They may be bound to a religion you may believe in, or things like that. So you can't understand a person unless you understand what they believe in. Good philosophy. And Protagoras' final point, there are no absolutes. You can always go a little bit further out on each end. You may have a theory of opposites, but you can always have something hotter than something else or colder than something else. So as we finish up on this unit with the Sophists, you can see that they didn't have a certain set of beliefs themselves. Rather, they believed on the relative nature of human knowledge and experience. And we still talk about a lot of those issues to this day. So, our next unit we get to the big three: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And they're going to have some radically different views on these ideas in the Sophists. So I can't wait to tell you about that stuff. See you next time. This has been a We Have Couches video production, copyright 2020, Professor Michael D. Botwin, all rights reserved. You better believe it.